lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
If you don't know where you
Ring
came
with the
from, it's hard for you to get to where you want to go.
harmonies of liberty.
I am Margaret Crawford Parson-Willins, and I am a descendant of Richmond Crawford who lived on the Brattonsville plantation. Okay, I was born at York General Hospital in Rock Hill, but I grew up right here on the family property. I grew up around a lot of farmland. My father grew cotton, so we could see cotton far and near. I grew up among a lot of orchards and all kinds of animals, turkeys, guineas, chickens, goats, cows, horses, you name it, we had it. The neighborhood was not as populated as it is now. The houses were farther apart, but we had a friendly community. We visited one another, we stayed in touch, we took care of one another. The neighborhood was integrated. We had, a black family here, a white family here. So when I was growing up, I knew nothing about segregation. I learned that later in life. But we had a thriving community. It was friendly, and everybody knew one another. As I said, the community was integrated. When I really found out about segregation was, I knew we went to separate schools. I was young, I didn't know why, so it didn't bother me at all. We went to separate schools. But when I really started realizing the differences was when we would get together, and I helped a lot of the white kids with their homework. And I noticed that they had new books, and I had old raggedy books, and we were in the same grade. That's when it started dawning on me that there is a difference. Uh, that their school system is better than mine. They have new books and I have old books at that time. And I think maybe I was in maybe 4th or 5th grade when that happened. I fell in love with South Carolina State. The librarian at my school took 3 of us to South Carolina State with her. And the campus was just beautiful. Everybody was so friendly, and I fell in love with it. I came home and said, this is where I want to go to school. My role during the Civil Rights Movement. I marched several times. I went to jail several times, 3, 4, 5, whatever. We were protesting, we were marching because we could not bowl at the bowling alley. We could shop at the retail stores downtown, but we could not sit at the lunch counter and have a meal. There were some stores where we could purchase food, but we had to go to a side door or a back door to get the food to go. There were a lot of things that we could not do, and we felt that we were citizens of the United States of America and that we had the right to do those things, so that's why we were protesting. We had several Caucasian people to protest with us, and those people were really treated bad. My most memorable experience during that time, well, there were 2 of them. The first one was when the young Caucasian man was pulled from among us and beaten. He was just beaten to a pulp, and there was nothing we could do about it. And the second most memorable occasion was South Carolina State was supposed to play football one night with Florida A&M University, and all of the football players were in jail. So they had to scramble to get the guys bonded out so they could play that game. So those were the two most memorable things. I had the privilege of spending the night in county jail, which was really, really awful. City jail was a step above county jail, but not good at all. Then when the total population of South Carolina State and Claflin College, which was next door, when all of those people came together and marched and they arrested all of us, the teachers, the students, they had no room to house us. So we were sent to the armory. We were at the armory for about almost a week. And then we were loaded in buses, and we were so happy because we thought that we were being taken back to campus. We got on the buses and we were singing and doing whatever, and the bus pulls off, and all of a sudden, wham, the bars come down between us and the driver. Why are you locking us up in this bus? We're going to Columbia to State Penitentiary. And we were there for over a week. We were there for so long because the NAACP would bail us out whenever we went to jail, but when we got to State Penitentiary, they denied bail. So we were there for over a week until bail could be negotiated for us. My parents encouraged me to participate. There was one difference between my parents and some of the other parents. There were a lot of parents who were afraid for their children to participate because they were afraid of losing their jobs. My parents worked for themselves, so they didn't have to worry about losing their job. So they encouraged me to participate. Yeah, they were concerned, but they thought it was worth it. My great-grandma, my mother's grandmother, she was a slave, and I knew her. I was 6 years old when she passed away, and at 114 years old. And I used to go with my mom and dad to visit her, and she would tell us little stories, and half of them I don't remember, but she would talk about things that happened to her when she was a slave. And I think it was instilled in me at that time. Some of the things she said sort of stuck with me, and as I grew older and thought about my grandma, and I said, I owe it to my grandma. She went through a lot to be free, and I owe it to her to continue what her generation had started, so that the generation behind me would have more privileges than what I had. So she was my motivation. I teach Sunday school at Mount Zion, and I teach kids from 8 to 12. And I have told them about my experiences over the years. And one thing that I continued to tell them was that you have become so complacent. Well, a lot of them don't know anything about the civil rights movement. For some reason, their parents are not interested in them knowing. But if you don't know where you came from, it's hard for you to get to where you want to go. And history will repeat itself. It's doing it right now. So I would encourage them to continue the fight.
facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Once I graduated from South Carolina State, I went to work for the Atomic Energy Commission in Washington, D.C. And this was after, which we'll probably touch on later, this was after my involvement in the civil rights movement. And the question that I had when I was interviewed for that job was my jail time going to have an effect on my obtaining the job? And I found out that it didn't. So I didn't have a problem as far as finding the job. But once I got to D.C., I had always heard that the southern states were the ones that experienced segregation. The northern states, in my mind, did not. But when I got to D.C., I found out that that was not true. Because when I applied for my first apartment on my own, I guess the person who answered the phone could tell from my voice that I was a black person. And I had just seen an ad in the paper that this apartment was vacant. Well, she told me that it had been rented. So I had a white friend of mine to call about the same apartment, and they made an appointment to show her the apartment. That was my first difficulty as an adult when I went to Washington, D.C. I think maybe that was my only difficulty as far as discrimination was concerned. But when I came back home, I applied for a job with the FBI. I went on the appointment, and for some reason they thought I was white. So when I get there, I'm sitting and I'm waiting, and the guy comes out, and he asked the receptionist, "Has Miss Parson gotten here yet?" And the receptionist said, "Yes, there she is." And I could tell that he was surprised that it was me sitting there. And I went back, we had the interview, but I could tell from the tone of his voice that I was not going to get that job. I could just see it. That's one reason that when I was trying to decide what my major was going to be at South Carolina State, I knew that eventually I wanted to be a business owner. I was good in math, and I liked business law because I had taken that class in high school. So it was a toss-up between going to law school or being an accountant. And my mom gave me a good piece of advice. She said, "Whatever you do," she said, "I would advise you to take education courses so that if what you really want fails, you can always teach. Teaching can always be your second choice." So when I came back to Rock Hill and I didn't get the job with the FBI, and there were several other jobs that I didn't get, and I knew that I was qualified for those jobs, so that's when I taught school.
What grades did you teach?
I taught high school, 11th and 12th grades, and then I taught on a junior college and a community college level. I taught at Central Piedmont for a while in Charlotte. The name of my business is MSM Financial Services, and I have been in business for 35 years. It offers a service to the community. It affords me the opportunity to have control over my own destiny. And it also gives me an opportunity to be a role model for other young people, to let them know that if they wish, they themselves can also work for themselves and provide a service to their communities. You know, believe it or not, and I found out after I was grown that my father really didn't, he never worked for anybody, but he really didn't consider himself a business owner. But he was. The land that I have now, where we are sitting, was purchased by my great-great-grandparents, and they farmed. So this land has been passed on from generation to generation, and my father grew everything: cotton, corn, wheat, all kinds of stuff in the gardens. The hogs, we had our own meat. The cows, we had our own beef, our own milk. When I got on my own, when I went to D.C., I didn't know how to shop for groceries because I didn't have to. I didn't know anything about the cuts of steak. You know, we had steak all the time, but I didn't know. I had to learn that. We were farmers.
God of our will,
I became involved because of my cousin, Wally Cathcart. He had become involved, I don't know how he started, but he had become involved maybe 3 years before I did. And he kept telling me that I needed to become involved because I was a descendant. I didn't even know I was a descendant. So he kept bugging me and bugging me until I decided one day to go out there, and I just got hooked, you know. At that time, Dr. Bertha Roddy was out there, and she was such an interesting character. She had us researching. That's how we found the 7 families. She taught us how to research and find things, and so I was learning. I was learning about my heritage, and that's what really got me involved. And that's what keeps me there. Because I feel that as a part of Brattonsville, that the knowledge that I can impart to the younger generation or the older generation is valuable. So here I am. Some people I have brought around, but a lot of them still have that stigma. I really don't understand why. I personally don't understand it. But there are some people who just aren't going to come around. And there's nothing I can do about it. I have said to a lot of people who don't want to have anything to do with the word slavery or whatever, that they need this history. They need to know where they came from. They owe it to their ancestors to keep their stories alive.
True to our God, true to our native land.